Hello guys, it's Bellman here. Welcome back to the channel. Before starting the video, please remember to turn on notifications and subscribe to my channel. Today, we're going to look at a talk by an author, journalist, and public speaker who I also think is a really good storyteller, Malcolm Gladwell, called The Unheard Story of David and Goliath, linked down in the description below. Let's go. To begin with, as the name of the talk suggests, Gladwell introduces the audience to the biblical story of David and Goliath, which here I would simplify for you as best as I can and to also give you guys some context in case you're not familiar with the story. The story took place more than 3,000 years ago in a valley called the Valley of Elah, the border between two countries, Israel and its mighty, ambitious neighbor, Palestine, who had always wanted to divide and conquer the kingdom of Israel. After hearing the news that the Palestinians were going to launch an invasion of his country, King of Israel Saul quickly positioned his troops along the northern side of the valley, facing his enemy in the south. Nonetheless, both sides were reluctant to move, as approaching the enemy, meaning, in other words, making their way down and into the canyon, which would be a death wish, because they would be fully exposed. This situation lasted for weeks until Palestine decided to send their strongest fighter, Goliath, a fully armed 6'9" giant down the valley, and challenged the Israelites to do the same for a 1v1 combat. And it is at this moment, when the Israeli troops were in a state of panic, a young shepherd boy named David stood out and said, "Hey, I'll go." "Oh my God, good heavens, you're mad," Saul says in disbelief. However, without other alternatives in place, Saul then gave the lad his armor, but to which David replied, "No, I'm all sorts of thanks. There's nothing to worry about." And off he went, with merely a sling and some stones in his pocket. When the giant saw the boy making his way down the gorge, he was furious. "Am I a dog that you would come to me with sticks?" he yelled. And without hesitation whatsoever, David takes out his sling, swings the rock, releases into the air, and hits Goliath right between his eyebrows, who falls down either dead or unconscious. The blow quickly ran up, grabbed the giant's knife, and cut his head off. In regard to the story, Gladwell states, over the course of writing his book, he felt that what we generally know about the story, which is David the underdog, winning an improbable victory against Goliath the giant, is wrong. To demonstrate, the author of the book, Blink, pointed out two key mistakes that we often make when we are interpreting the story. The first mistake we make is we assume that all David had is his sling. That's to say, Gladwell argues, slings are apparently far more deadly than we think, while surprisingly, they are one of the most decisive weapons in ancient warfare that determined an army's victory. Concurrently, it is also worth noting that the stones David picked in the Valley of Elah, shown through scientific research, are much denser compared to regular stones. Taking the two factors into account, it is hence safe to say that what David had was not merely a stick and some random stones, rather a lethal weapon that could cause significantly more damages than we originally thought. Furthermore, beyond mistaking the potential harm that David's weapon could cause, the 58-year-old journalist suggests that we have misinterpreted Goliath's strength as well. Such could be seen through several lines of the Bible, as said by Gladwell, namely, Goliath is led onto the valley floor by an attendant as he walks slowly and yells when he sees David, "Am I a dog that you will come to me with sticks?" The Canadian author then points out that it is terribly odd that the presumably strongest man that is challenging the Israelis to a fight is being handheld by an assistant, while he missaw David's stick as sticks when he was holding just one. On top of that, it appears that the giant also doesn't seem to notice that the young boy was not wearing any armor, especially when he was expecting to fight in a 1v1 combat. It's as if he's oblivious to what's going on that day, says Gladwell. To provide an explanation to Goliath's height and his extraordinary, unusual behavior that day, based on descriptions of the Bible, there was in fact speculation among the medical community that it is possible that the Palestinian giant might have had acromegaly, a condition which is caused by a tumor in the pituitary gland that leads to excessive production of the growth hormone. Added to that, one of the most notable side effects of acromegaly is poor eyesight, due to the tumor suppression on the visual nerves. Thus, based on what we just mentioned, this immaculately explains the reason behind Goliath's height and his strange behavior. To sum up, Gladwell says, the strength of Goliath is also his biggest weakness, and giants are not as strong and powerful as they seem, and sometimes the shepherd boy has a sling in his pocket. Indeed, it might seem that the story of David and Goliath is just like one of those stories in which the hero's ability is undermined, but where the villain is always defeated at the end. Nonetheless, in my point of view, it is a story that carries great significance and teaches us an important lesson in life, which here in my opinion section, I'll use my own words to elaborate on Gladwell's arguments and the lessons I believe we should learn today. First and foremost, I would argue, after listening to the story of David and Goliath, that the idea that others are stronger or weaker than us is solely an illusion, as the strength of the individual we are looking at may strongly depend on the person who is judging. Whilst neither can we say that a person is strong or weak only based on our first impression of them, as I think people all have strengths and weaknesses, and it is merely a matter of how obvious these traits are. Taking the story of David and Goliath, for instance, David would only have had the advantage over Goliath the giant if he had a sling with him, the rocks he picked that day, and was in an open area. Under such conditions, the chances of winning were tremendously high for David, because he was smart, agile, and resourceful. Albeit, if the place of the battle turned out to be in an enclosed area, for example in an arena, then, needless to say, little David wouldn't have stood the chance. However, I suppose even it is the case that Goliath had bad eyesight, considering the power and weight advantage of Goliath, there would have been little chance that David could win. Therefore, I would argue, beyond not to exaggerate or underestimate people's strengths and weaknesses, in a practical sense, we would have to logically examine people's strengths and weaknesses so that we can use this information to understand others and protect ourselves. And that leads me to my second point, which is how we should view our own strengths and weaknesses and whether they will work to our advantage or disadvantage depending on the situation we are in. In addition, it's important to think to ourselves that yes, we may have weaknesses which can lead to all sorts of problems, but despite that, how can we turn our weaknesses into strengths to protect ourselves and use them to our advantage? Nevertheless, I think, more than that, we should stop seeing certain traits of ourselves as a strength or weakness, as I firmly believe that each and every single quality we have can work as both a strength or weakness. And on top of that, over time and a terrible amount of practice, we're also able to turn a quality, skill, or talent of ours into our strength. Exactly like what David did with his sling. If it wasn't for years of practice of using a sling to defend his flock from lions and wolves, David may never possibly won the battle against the giant Goliath. Thus, I'd say, being aware of this, we don't have to be an underdog, rather a human that knows how to use our intelligence and knowledge about ourselves and the environment to our advantage and adapt to the changing world around us. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, comment below, share this video, turn on notifications, and subscribe to my channel. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please comment below if you have any thoughts or topics that you want me to do. And that's for today. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.